Hey guys, it's Shaylin Marie, and I'm here with another speed build. This time we are using a lot of the debug items in order to build what I have called Sunnydale Cemetery. So basically, I've been rewatching the Buffy the Vampire series from the late 90s, early 2000s, and I am still such a Buffy fan. I can't even help myself. And I was thinking about the cemetery, like mausoleum that Spike lives in the later seasons of the show. And that space sort of always was fascinating to me. I just found it so absolutely interesting that I basically tried to recreate something like that with this idea that this would actually be a residential lot. So this is not built as an actual cemetery, though it very clearly looks like one. It is built as a residence, but it is a residence built for vampires. So the parts that are above ground look like a mausoleum, complete with what look like tombs and other very death-related mausoleum-esque items that I could find from Debug. So I filled the mausoleum and tried to make it look like, this is a place that is somewhat visited, but maybe not super often. So there are flowers, there are candles, there are plants and things, lots of plaques on the walls. Sort of like those like mausoleums, I guess, that you go into, and rather than having gravestones, there are sort of these plaques in front of the space where I guess really the bodies are sort of stacked up on top of one another. And so I just thought that that whole idea was really interesting. So I tried to play around with it in this build. So you can see I'm still putting a lot of flowers in and really trying to make it look as if these are real memorials. Because in my mind, the mausoleum is quite real. It is just there's a vampire residence underneath. And so that is what I'm constructing. And I do go several floors deep in order to be able to put the vampire residence below the actual mausoleum. So I'm placing the caskets here, the coffins that the vampires will sleep in. There are lots of candles everywhere, trying to utilize those sorts of features. And then I start playing with roofing. Roofing for this particular building was really difficult. I had it in my head what I wanted it to look like, but I wanted it to look almost sort of church-like, instead of just maybe like a domed stone surface that mausoleums often resemble. So playing with a lot of the things we actually got from the vampire pack, but also just choosing things that look sort of gothic or medieval and fit with the theme of what I was assembling. So I tried out a ton of different windows, a ton of different decorative elements, really, I guess, just trying to make this look like how I imagined it. And I did not go back and actually look at the mausoleum that Spike lives in. And so I call this Sunnydale Cemetery because that was the source of the inspiration for me, but I was in no way trying to replicate that build. It was just really where my thought process started. So all of these gravestones that you see here are from Debug. I spent, I think, over an hour going through the debug menu and just pulling things out that I wanted and making sure to pull out multiple copies of those things, because you can't actually copy or duplicate the items when you pull them from debug. It doesn't work. So I tried to make sure that I was pulling multiple copies of the things that I knew that I might use. So I spent about an hour before this video actually really started pulling out those pieces and making sure that I had things to place around the lot that weren't necessarily adding to the lot's value, because I knew that I was still essentially building a residence underneath the mausoleum and needing to use items that do have a cost associated with them. So I didn't want I didn't want an astronomical cost to be associated with this particular lot. So I do try to keep the cost fairly minimal, although I think it still ends up being kind of an expensive lot. But the whole vibe of it was so fun. I think this took me a couple of days to actually complete, because just choosing the debug items took me over an hour, and then I really started playing with things. I just didn't have enough time the first evening that I started this. So this did take me a couple of days. So this was a couple of sessions of building. It involved lifting a lot of items, using a lot of the move objects cheat, painting the terrain, moving things around, moving several copies of things around, just trying to keep things on the lot that I knew I wanted, and then finally deleting them when I knew that I had what I wanted. I did decide, because the mausoleum that I built only houses, I believe, 3 vampires, I wanted there to be another space. And oftentimes in a cemetery, there isn't just one mausoleum, there's 1 or 2. Sometimes therefore there could be several, especially in really old cemeteries, or maybe several family mausoleums. So I wanted to put another one here that is much smaller, but this is another vampire residence. So you could have a family of vampires that all reside in the same lot, but don't necessarily reside in the same space. You will notice I didn't waste time putting in a lot of kitchen items. The vampires don't eat. Typically, they either feed off of victims around Forgotten Hollow or wherever it happens to be that they are living. I believe that I built this in Newcrest just because it happened to be where I had an empty lot. But because of that, I didn't put in a kitchen anywhere. So if you download this from the gallery, it is available on the gallery. It is called Sunnydale Cemetery. It is listed under my username, which is Shaylin Marie, same as the channel. So you could always put in a kitchen if you wanted your vampires to reside alongside humans. It just so happened that I had really played out the Spike storyline in my head, and so I really wanted this to be for vampires, so it is very vampire focused. I did play around with a lot of those gothic elements. I used that staircase from Debug, so that is not actually a usable staircase. It just looks like it is, and I put a door there because I thought it was cool. But I ended up putting in another entrance in the back with an actual staircase that works, because I don't believe that your Sims can actually climb that staircase, although I didn't get a chance to play test it. And I actually haven't yet played with this lot. This is very much just focused on me building what I wanted. This is the first time that I saw a build so clearly in my mind. Before I really started the building process, I had so much fun with this. I really kind of hope that I can use, TV shows that I'm watching, or just characters that I'm in love with, to inspire me for further builds, because I love how this came out, and I would love to create more stuff like this. So you can see that there are a bunch of little planters still, and those aren't permanently placed. I was still messing around with how I wanted the lot to look and feel. Once I had decided to add this second residence on the property, I just sort of moved everything over so that it was away from there so I could build this. And this does end up looking much more like a church, or some sort of building where funeral services could be held, than I had intended, except that it's so tiny. I also, and you'll see this in a little bit in the video, but I also didn't put the coffin for the vampire underground for this particular lodging on the build. I ended up just putting it inside this main room. So if one of your Sims wandered in there, they're in for a nasty surprise, because there is definitely a vampire. Again, just trying to get a lot of those debug plants and foliage items to make the cemetery look old, like it's been here for some time. It is a well-established cemetery. It is one maybe that isn't so frequented, but it has been in the area for some time and is dated. And so trying to make it look like there's a lot of greenery and things, because those items often make buildings look as if they've been there for some time, because trees take quite a long time to grow. So this is that staircase that I ended up putting at the rear of that building so that we could put, there's another vampire residence underneath, and you could always either build this up or put a basement in. I just didn't. I figured having the ability for 4 vampires to sleep on the lot was probably enough. But yeah, this is definitely editable, and there are definitely ways to expand the residences if you wanted to. So here, every time I thought that I was getting close to being finished, I would end up realizing that I didn't have enough elements that really made it look as if it was an actual mausoleum. And so I kept going back in and just adding more. I may have gotten a little out of control. This is definitely the most elaborately decorated lot that I've ever had, but not in terms of the interior. I do often do a lot of clutter in my builds. The outside is just far more designed than I have ever done, but this was definitely the place to do it if I wanted to make that cemetery look as if it had been there for a while. I'm definitely using all of the paintings that came with the Vampires pack. They're just so perfect for something like this. In my head, it's this storyline of these vampires. They don't hang on to much, but they do carry around these, paintings of themselves, maybe early on in their vampirehood or from when they were human. And that those are the items that they treasure, and those are the things that they carry around with them from place to place to place. So here I'm just trying to make sure that I have entrances and staircases and exits and all the places to be able to allow the vampires to get in and out very easily. Just checking out, taking one final look at that little cemetery, doing a little bit of terrain painting. I just put a little dirt and sort of like fallen leaves underneath the plants and the trees, so that it looks a little bit more natural and not quite so manicured, because that over manicured look doesn't have that same dated, aged feel that I wanted. And so then I got the idea that maybe some of these had either been there for quite some time, and the earth is almost like reclaiming them a little bit, like it's starting to build up around them, or being washed away. And then I had some ideas that maybe one of the older families in the area, where they were still burying people in the cemetery, which is why it kind of looked like some of those graves have maybe been more recently dug. There isn't grass yet grown over that land, with the idea that only like the richest or most established families would probably bury people in the cemetery, because it is so old and traditional. So yeah, that is my Sunnydale Cemetery. I am still absolutely in love with it. I am still so excited about the way that this build turned out. Like I said, it's definitely available on the gallery called Sunnydale Cemetery. It's available under my username, Shaylin Marie, and I hope you'll check it out. And if you also have a love for Buffy the Vampire Slayer, or are simply just interested in giving your vampire sort of an interesting place to live, I hope you check it out. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe.